lecture in Molecular and Cellular Biology module, Shockwave. Please mute your microphone and be ready with pen and notepad to take notes. Thank you. Welcome to BB 101 course at IIT Bombay. Please mute your microphone and be ready with pen and notepad to take notes. Thank you.
All right. Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to BB 101, Molecular and Cellular Biology module. Today we are going to talk about cell cycle, which we continued from last lecture, and then biotechnology and DNA tools. Rohit, you want to say something before I even start? Okay, unmute and talk. Rohit, please unmute and talk. Wow, I have many hands raised. I have not even started my lecture. Okay, can TL unmute students, Rohit, then Jitartha and Sahil. Hello?
Sir, shall I wait for Rohit to speak or should I ask my question?
Rohit, yeah, please go ahead. Who is speaking? Rohit? All right, I think let's take the some question discussion after we finish at least one section of my lecture, and then we talk. Otherwise it's going to be quite delayed. Okay. All right. Let me first start with the. Please keep your curiosity for some time. Hold on hold. Let me finish with the first part. We will talk, and then I move on to the second part like that. In the meantime, if anything specific comes to your mind, put in the chat. So today we are going to start about cell cycle. We have discussed about cell division, various type of cell organelle prior to that. Now we are moving ahead with the cell cycle, and if the cell cycle does not occur normally, get dysregulated, even disease like cancer may occur, right? Then how one could think about even the cells are being reprogrammed. Even that has to be discussed. And finally, we'll start about various exciting things happening in the areas of DNA tools and biotechnology. So these are the various points which we are going to talk today. Jitartha, you have any urgent thing to say something? I see your hand being raised continuously.
Am I audible, sir?
You're audible.
Yeah, sir, I just wanted to request you that if you could go a little slow with the explanations, because I even asked with some of my friends and we feel like the lectures are going a little fast.
All right, I have not even started, so we will try to go slow. Again, after the end of each section, you can then raise something what is unclear to you. Okay. All right. So the first part, I'm going to talk to you about cell cycle, which we started discussion in the previous lecture, and then how its dysregulation may cause various type of diseases, especially cancer. So when the normal cell cycle occurs, as we discussed, we have G1 phase, S phase, G2 phase, and which is all part of the interphase, right? And then we have a very small or the short mitotic phase, M phase, in which we have prophase, prometaphase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So this part we had discussed in the last lecture. So in the cell cycle, there are many checkpoints, right? So these checkpoints are required to control and regulate that the entire cell division process is well regulated and governed. And it's like, when you are driving really fast on a highway, you have some checkpoints, you have some speed breakers, you have some traffic police. They're going to do some check for you to ensure that you are within the speed limit. And likewise, within the cell also, these cell cycles are going to regulate the activities and trying to ensure that the process is getting completed with the the rules to follow. Otherwise, what may happen if it becomes uncontrolled, then you see the things like the tumor mass being grown and the cancer kind of things being progressing. So for the normal cell cycle to operate, various type of checkpoints are very important. One is in the G1 checkpoint, other is in the G2 phase, and third is in the M checkpoint or in the mitotic phase. So these checkpoints are important, and how these checkpoints actually work in the cell. So these are checkpoints which we are talking about within the the cell cycle, how we are going to control those. So these are regulated with the proteins, right? Because you can't have the speed breaker, or you can't have the any other ways of measuring these regulation. So there are a set of protein which is showing the activities or reducing the activity, which actually interplays and shows that the process is moving smoothly or not. So in this particular process, there are a group of proteins known as cyclins. These are very important proteins, which is quite play important role in the process of cell cycle regulation. And these cyclin proteins are being synthesized during the S phase, when the DNA replication is happening. At the same time, there is these cyclin proteins also being synthesized. So now we have abundance of cyclin proteins being accumulated at the end of S phase. Then on my slide, I mentioned about the CDK, cyclin dependent kinases. Any kinase, the kinase broadly, the family of kinase proteins, are having ability to transfer the phosphate group and be involved in the phosphorylation process. So these proteins are involved in various types of phosphorylation activities. And this particular receptor, CDK, cyclin dependent kinase receptors, it's going to bind to the cyclin protein tightly. So now when you have more of the cyclin getting accumulated, CDK, which is present there, is going to bind and make the complex of CDK with the cyclin protein, what you see in the red colored cyclin protein being bound with the blue colored CDKs. So this is actually ensuring that there was sufficient cyclin being synthesized in this phase, moving to the G2 phase, binding happened. And now on the next checkpoint of the mitotic checkpoint, which will be actually the metaphase of mitosis. At that time, when the metaphase process gets completed and the mitosis is looking like going well, then this particular complex get dissociated. So first complex being formed, and then eventually complex being dissociated. So that's happening. Second thing, what you see now, this particular red thing is getting stripped off from this particular complex. And now the CDKs are still present over there, but cyclin being degraded. So therefore, in this particular interplay, we will see the role of regulation of these proteins with the binding or unbinding happening. And as a result, you will see that this is very much regulated process because of the interplay of protein of cyclins and cyclin-dependent kinases. This drawing will probably explain you this thing slightly better, that S phase cyclin proteins being synthesized, they are getting accumulated in the G2 phase, and now they're forming complexes by reaching to the G2 checkpoint. And then that is going to allow the cell to enter in the mitotic phase, because now a cell is following these signals and cues. Okay, now we are ready. We got sufficient DNA synthesized. We got sufficient cycle synthesized. Now allow it to move to mitosis so that the mitosis can be taken forward properly. Now it allows the cell to enter in the mitotic phase. After mitotic phase is getting completed, then now it is allowing the dissociation of the complex to happen. Cyclin get degraded, and then it, the CDK further moves in the G1 phase. So this is how the proteins are playing important role in these type of checkpoints and regulating the cell cycle. These are the what we talked about internal signal or internal molecule, which are playing important role of controlling these activities or regulating these activities. Whereas there are many other external factors as well, which is important. For example, nutrients, how much is the nutrient level in the cell, growth factors. But more importantly, even various mechanical features like space, attachment with the substrate, even these features play important role of how the cell division should happen or the cell cycle is operating properly or not. And I think one of you had asked earlier about in which a mechanical engineering student can be involved in some of these kind of research. And that's where I think, mechanical engineering or mechanobiology field is developing very well. When many people are studying the cell properties and looking at the mechanical properties, in this case, imagine that, we have a whatever volume we have of our body is that limited, and within that cells are continuously growing. So at some point within that density, the cell has to stop dividing, because now cell has perceived that sufficient density have been achieved, and now you stop. You can't just keep dividing, and otherwise it will become uncontrolled. So that's where the normal cell cycle will stop as soon as you see the density have been achieved. Once that density is achieved, now it is known as density dependent inhibition. It means it's going to inhibit that process normally, automatically, being regulated. Whereas in case of cancer cells, they are not going to follow this rule of if it in a box, the cells are growing. They will still continue to be grow and make multiple layers after layers. And that's what something makes them more specialized. And a lot of people are studying the properties, how this is actually disobeying these rules and still trying to make multiplications and make multiple copies of that. Additionally, these cells actually require some substrates, even for the experiment which we will talk. You will see, like, the cancer cell requires some not cancer, the normal cells require some substrate for the anchorage. Whereas the cancer cell actually can also have ability to, without having the substrate, still they can multiply and they can grow. So again, they do not follow this particular rule of anchorage dependence, or they do not require a specific substrate or environment for further to grow. So now these are the normal thing which we spoke, but in the context of cancer cell, as we have been discussing now, that the cancer cell do not obey the cell cycle checkpoints, what we talk for the showing where the cycle and CDK interplay is important. Cancer cells are not obeying that, and they are continuously then making a multiple number of cells, multiplying those in further layers. And as you can see here, the uncontrolled cell growth is keep happening, and they're not following the density dependent inhibition, which is going to stop in the normal cell growth. So therefore, now they can make the tumor mass, and that's what you see, like, tumor being generated with the large mass. They do not require a specific substrate to get adhered, and therefore from the blood cell, they can actually move to different places in the body. Now, in this context, it becomes interesting discussion. And again, in the cancer field, a lot of things are quite unknown, despite decades of research and really trying to understand a lot about cancer biology. Still, there are too many unknown facts. People have made some success, at least by now, to look for some markers for different type of cancer. And those markers mean those some genes or proteins of interest, which can be utilized with some knowledge to do cancer detection. For example, if somebody goes for various checkup, looking at the various type of protein level, looking at various imaging analysis, one could at least diagnose the cancer. Now there are set of medication which has been thought to work well, but many times they actually show a lot of toxic effects, side effects. Those are the chemotherapies, which is still one need to work out on that area, how to improve the therapeutic aspect for the treatment. So nevertheless, our understanding has been trying to understand the cell cycle behavior, the uncontrolled growth, in which one could try to understand it better to control the cancer. Now, I'll just take a typical example of the breast cancer, which is very commonly seen in women. And now in breast cancer, earlier it was thought to be one cancer type. But later on, it was realized with more of the gene studies and looking at the gene expression profiles, that not all the women having breast cancer is same. Actually, the genetic makeup and the expression of RNA and proteins, those are quite different across different women of the breast cancer. And looking at that pattern analysis, now there is an understanding that there are broadly 4 types or subtypes of breast cancer. So these subtypes are based on their hormone receptor levels, like progesterone receptors, estrogen receptors, Herceptin receptors, or all 3 are absent as the triple negative breast cancer. So now think about if you are giving the same cocktail of drugs to all the women, irrespective of their hormonal level or receptor levels, they're not going to show the same impact and not going to bind to the drug properly. So therefore, just trying the blind treatment may not help out, right? That's a full new field of precision medicine and personalized medicine is actually developing very fast, where you will see the DNA tools and biotechnologies are playing very important role. How our understanding of the cell cycle and different type of markers is now leading with the more of the new technologies and tools to trying to understand it better. So in this context, one interesting and challenging question is, let's say this breast cancer can be treated easily. That is probably one of the good cancer to treat because of the lump of the mass can be dissected out, and one could do surgery to remove that and radiate that area, and then finally do some chemotherapy to control that. So there is a good success rate of treating the breast cancer in that way. Nevertheless, there is a high probability of having the cancer recurrence. It means the cancer can come back and recur. So in that, this is a major challenge that is known as metastasis process or metastatic cancer. Now, why I thought about all of these points to discuss here, because of this problem of substratum requirement for the cancer cell to adhere. Now, the metastatic cell, if you think about, if a cancer was originated in the breast region, and now it got treated, and now it is going to recur or show again the tumor growth. So ideally, it should happen in the same area, but that does not happen. For some reason, the metastatic tumor goes to different parts of body, but mainly to the bone or liver. These are the organs which where mostly this gets metastasized. It means the primary tumor migrates to these locations, okay, and these locations where now it gets a new home, and now it gets better secondary tumor to be grown over there after 5 years or 10 years of the recurrence. So now, while we say that cancer cell does not require the substratum for its growth, but there is something there which actually helps these cancer cell also to get adhered and get a proper homing somewhere. That's why the breast cancer tumor does not happen, like does not go to all the organs, does not go to heart, does not go to pancreas, but only goes to some of these organs specifically. And now it actually starts getting favorable growth over there and develops into the new tumor type. Then challenge becomes very difficult to how to treat this individual. The secondary tumor or metastatic tumor becomes very difficult to treat. Like now there is not much hope left by that time for further treatment. Patients already very weak by that time, have gone through all this treatment. And further, are you going to treat with the drugs which is required for the breast cancer treatment, or you're going to look for the liver cancer treatment or the bone type of tumor treatment? So these are the challenges which are there. And that's where there's a lot of unknowns than the knowns in the cancer field. We are going to show you at least, the processes while, talking about in this course. Our own lab actually does lots of research in the cancer biology and cancer, especially brain tumors, where we have a lot of collaboration from Tata Memorial Hospital, which is locally in Mumbai here, which is Asia's largest hospital. Many clinicians, they work closely with us, and various type of patient samples from the tumor type, tumor tissue, or the blood samples, cerebrospinal fluid, many type of body fluids being analyzed. More recently, as a part of an international project of Cancer Moonshot, we have also started looking into breast cancer, cervical, and oral cancer. So, whereas, while doing the cancer research and understanding the cancer and trying to look for some novel targets and biomarkers is quite challenging task. And that's where a lot of, globally research is going on. Still, for research purpose, if you want to understand these processes better, you can't just do everything on the patients, right? So biologically, you can do these things better on the cell lines. You have seen how the cells are being grown for bacterial cell. We have shown you in the lab. Now, when we talk about eukaryotic cell, in this case, human cells, their treatment and the sterility which we have to maintain has to be quite a lot. And now, if you want to look at a new drug, whether the new drug could actually react well on the cancer cell, then you have to do this experiment in the lab settings. So let's say you are coming up with a computational approach where you can have the various drug molecules, chemical structures, and you are looking at those drugs and trying to look at various protein pockets and trying to do some computational simulation to see if my 1 lakh compound library, from that these proteins of interest in the cancer, are they showing any binding? And which of these molecules are showing binding, then I want to test those out experimentally. You cannot just take directly on the patient, right? So you'd like to first test out experimentally at different levels. So first it goes to the cell line based model, then animal trial happens, and then only you move on to the human studies. So in this case, we will show you some steps involved to give you some visual sense or the feel of how these kind of research are actually happening. And a lot of these basic tools remain the same what you have seen for bacterial work, but now we will show you how to grow the cancer cell and look for some drug treatments in the context of various cell cycle which we are talking right now. So let me just show you this lab experiment.
Hello guys.
So before starting the cell culture, we should maintain some basic need of cell culture things because we are culturing cells which are prone to contaminants like bacteria and fungus. So you can see we have maintained the laminar food in a proper, in a UV chamber. It is actually a UV chamber where we at least give 20 minutes of UV treatment before starting the experiment. And now, since it is, we have kept it before 20 minutes, I'll turn off the UV and before opening the sash hole or the door of the laminar, we should turn the airflow. So you can hear the airflow. The laminar is made in such a way that the all side of the laminar, you can see there is a flow so that other particles or aerosols or any particle from the external environment cannot enter inside the laminar. The cells I'm using is HCT116, and how the drug is affecting the cell cycle progression of in those cells, we will try to see. So by performing the basic step of this of the experiment, I'll explain the basic of cell culture that we do in our lab. Okay. We store our cells in this incubator, which is supplied with carbon dioxide, but at 37 degrees Celsius, and it is actually an humid chamber. Okay, so H2O is the pH. Performing any experiment, we should see how our cells look. What is the morphology? Let us now see the process of trypsinization and how we make cell suspension. Okay. Cells are adherent. We have to first remove the media and then we will add the proteolytic enzyme, that is the trypsin. We'll add trypsin just to cover. So this is the trypsin. It comes with trypsin EDTA solution. Remove media from the wells. While removing media, make sure that we are not disturbing the cells. So while removing media, make sure that we are not disturbing the cells. Now, after removing the media, we will give a brief wash with PBS. This will make sure that the loosely bound cells or dead cells from the live cell population will be washed out. So I'm getting PBS to wash the cells. The PBS was done. Now we will add the proteolytic enzyme. Okay, we'll add trypsin and keep it for 2 minutes so that it will work on the cells and then it will help the cells in detaching from the surface. Now, once the incubation is over, we will add media to the trypsinized cells to neutralize the effect of trypsin. This is an important step, otherwise trypsin will deplete the cell membrane entirely. So this is how we kind of regulate the trypsinization process, so that cell will just detach from the surface, but it will not affect the cellular membrane. are detached from the flask, we'll collect the cells into a 15 mm falcon, and then we will give a brief centrifugation process. We'll spin it down so that we'll have our cells. Okay, and then we'll remove the supernatant. And then that cell suspension will be taken for staining with the DAPI or Propidium agar. Now we'll centrifuge the fluid to collect down the cells. Centrifugation is done.
All right, student, you have to understand that what we are showing you is actually directly from the lab settings. So in the real lab situation, there are a lot of laminar hoods which is having the fans. Then there is a incubated sound. Then there is a various type of cylinders are kept, air conditioning sound. All of that actually is the natural music of the lab, right? So you can't take that off. So you have to bear with that. And what we are trying to give you the feel of it, how to do these experiments. And ideally, what we are showing you here is these commercial cell lines, which is available commercially for doing the experiments, which one could purchase from different centers or different companies. And these kind of standard cell line for example, MCF7 for the breast cancer or HCT for the colorectal cancer, these cell lines, they have been maintained over the various generations of growth, which can be taken forward for the research purpose. Whereas if you want to actually take the actual patient tumor, which will be more relevant, and you want to grow in the cell culture yourself, then you can actually try to take the tumor mass quickly and then put that in the nutrient medium, try to grow those cells and then passage them for a couple of generations and see if they can survive, and you can get the patient-derived cell lines. Idea was to show you how to grow and culture these cancer cells in the lab settings. Once you have started growing them and you see the morphology of the cell in the microscope and you achieve sufficient density, then you are good to start your next set of experiments. So now I'm requesting Avinash, one of the TAs from the team, to show you some results of this experiment.
Yeah, so thank you, sir. Yeah. So now, as you are all aware of different phases of cell cycle, and there are different checkpoints basically which allow the cells from the passes from the one phase to another phase. So this experiment is basically based on the understand the effect of anti-cancer drug in the cancer cell lines. So in this experiment, two cells are basically cancer colorectal cancer stem cells was taken, and it was treated with a drug which is anti-cancerous. After that, culturing that cells, we have tryptophanized with the using of the trypsin. So basically, the trypsin help in the detachment of the cells. After that, detachment of the cells, we wash the cells and stain with the DAPI, which is basically kind of a dye which binds with the DNA of cells. After that, we use one of the techniques which is basically a FACS, and it helps in the identification of the cells on the basis of their fluorescence and intensity, and to identify which phase and which phase of the cell cycle they are present. So these are the basically overall experiment. So these are the basically result from that experiment. So these are in the right in the left side. So just yeah. So these are the basically cancerous cells, and these are the treated cells. So these treated cells are basically treated with the one of the drugs which inhibit the cancer progression. So this is the basically histogram or result generated after the FACS analysis. So here in the cancer cells, you can see that so in the x-axis basically there is a fluorescence intensity which is by you can just assume the amount of DNA in the different phases of the cells, and y-axis you can see the count of the cells. So in cancer cancer cells when there is no inhibition of a cell cycle division. So in that case, there is a cells are basically growing and dividing. So so this phase, this histogram basically represents the cells are present in the G1, G0 and G1 phase. So and this is the quadrant basically represent the cells which are present in the S phase, and this quadrant represent the cells are present in the G2 or mitotic phases. So in the treated one, you can see that the cells which are treated with the anti-cancer drug, the number of cells in the G2 or M phase are basically low. So we can assume that this drug is basically a kind of inhibiting the cell cycle division. So this is a proper normal one of the experiment which is usually just trying to show you how the cancer cells is showing this effect in the anti-cancer drug. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Avinash. And so I hope at least all of you got the hint that what we are talking about cell cycle and various ways. There are ways to measure that, what are the number of cell population in which cell cycle stage of G1 as G2, and looking at the drug treatment, what is the density being achieved. So those kind of measurement being done. A lot of microscopy based work is actually done to characterize these cancer cell and looking at the effect of the drug. Also, one would like to look at some protein expression or the gene expression based on your drug treatment. What else is getting changed? The real problems in most of the time for these type of cancer treatments are, if you are trying to take these drugs work with some mechanism, right? As I mentioned, these drugs are going to bind to some protein on their receptor and trying to do some specific inhibition of those proteins. But these proteins are always part of some other cascade or some network, right? So those are the various type of signaling networks involved. And now if these type of networks somehow, in addition to binding to this protein, the entire network get changed or cascade getting affected, it's sometime may have even more detrimental impact. So you do not want to change a lot of stuff. You just want to have very specific or intended inhibition of these proteins. So in addition to your target proteins or genes of interest, what else also changes becomes important to characterize. And that's why you see many of the cancer patient treatment, many type of side effect toxicity comes into the play, where the body is not able to tolerate because the drugs are not binding to the right proteins, and many other things are also it is binding. And therefore you see all kind of immune system loss and hair loss and body becoming weak. All of these issues comes up, right? So these are some of the reality. As I mentioned that in the cancer research area, despite decades of knowledge and research happening, a lot of things are still very challenging, and we will leave you with more questions than answer here to read more about it and see where you can take your disciplines forward to understand this better. Why cell growth is still a problem in the cancer, in which way the cancer cells can actually grow much longer and survive longer, why they're so powerful, which is not being controlled. And the reality is that at some point, which when cancer really becomes advanced and become, quite, grade 4 or so in the most of the cancer, it becomes so aggressive that, none of the drugs are actually able to make any impact. And that's where only patients are kept on the, just for the pain relief rather than the actual cancer treatment. And that's where I have seen it's clinicians and medical science being pretty much giving up at that stage. Only very heavy steroids are being used to try to subsidize the pain, and that's the reality of these type of tumors. Like, what makes them so powerful that nothing can actually stop them at that stage to grow and control. Why don't the cancer cells die normally? What are the checkpoints which are missing in these cancer cells? And finally, how do cancer cells escape some of these, treatment and destruction, which we are talking right now? So there are a lot of things going on, research, a lot of still questions which are pending to be addressed. And I'll share you some research papers. In fact, for some of you who might be interested to learn more about it, it is from the Nature Reviews, which was very nicely written, and will give you at least some more idea. But at least the positive point here is that with advancement of knowledge from biologists and clinicians, and now addition of technologies, at least we have better technologies for cancer detection. What has been understood by biologists that, okay, for different cancer cells, there are different type of genes or proteins which makes them very unique. They're highly expressing. And those things have been identified or being identified in different projects right now. For example, the prostate cancer, there is a protein known as PSA, prostate-specific antigen. This protein is being tested in the the old men to check for the level of PSA proteins, and that actually gives some idea to the clinician that whether the individual might be having the prostate cancer. So now there are some antibodies which bind to the proteins, right? So proteins antigen antibody reaction happens. If you have a specific antibody against a specific protein or antigen of interest, it could actually bind, and those interactions could be utilized for some way of signal detection. And therefore, what I showed you here is one of the technology, which is the circulating tumor cell detection technology, already approved by the regulatory agencies from the United States, US FDA. And it is based on some markers of the cancer cell, especially looking at the epithelial cell adhesion molecules, EPCAM, and trying to measure those binding and look at cancer early stage and trying to detect the tumor. So likewise, various technologies are available based on the immunocytochemistry, cell search system, flow cytometry, depth arrays. A lot of technologies are there. It depends on how much you would like to read and learn about it. We can share you more details. Also, many of the molecular technologies like looking at RNA expression, looking at genome sequencing, looking at the protein expression, all of these things are also adding a lot of knowledge for newer and newer tests to be developed. Now, on a positive side, there are many leads coming from these technologies are now resulting into new tests being deployed, which can be used for the mass screening. In US now, after FDA approval, there are some tests which is used for the early screening of breast and ovarian cancer in women. And one of that test name is ROMA test. And this test is actually based on 4 or 5 protein, which one could try to look at their levels from the plasma sample. So if a normal woman is going for the routine medical checkup and looking at various proteins present in their blood, if their expression level is very high, then at least that together that test is probably 80 to 85% specific, which could, and quite sensitive test. So that can actually give some indication to clinician that these women, along with some clinical history of their family, if they see this kind of pattern being emerging, even in a very healthy individual, then they will actually take that information forward for the further testing to be done. So again, some of these things are going to be changing, where a lot of routine health checkup could also involve various type of cancer early detection. And that's a lot of research and a lot of technologies are being utilized for early detection of cancer. Because what has been at least learned by now, that treating cancer at advanced stage is very challenging and almost is still very impossible. So can we control that, and treating early is still quite possible. So therefore, all emphasis right now is about the early part of the cancer, understanding and treatment and detection part. So I'll show you now, like, again, some of you have been asking me questions either in the email or in the forums that in which way, like, this understanding can also involve some of you who are interested in the subject. And I'm just showing you one of the clip here from your just senior second year student, Kavilya, to just give a glimpse of what kind of work even students of IIT Bombay are doing with us on different projects, where your knowledge and your skill and your interest of computational power could also be utilized towards some very fundamental knowledge generation. It's a very early stage project, but it will give you some glimpse of it.
Research intern at the proteomics lab of IIT Bombay under Professor Sanjeeva Srivastava. I'm a second year mechanical engineering student, and today I'll be talking about some of the work that I've done in the past few months. So my main project is biomarker research for colorectal cancer. So before we dive right in the project, I want to tell you a little bit about the incentive for doing research work. So the research is very current on a topic of your interest. Then you gain a lot of knowledge about newer and expert things. I personally underwent a training program through which I learned a variety of tools, softwares, and other theoretical understanding that are needed to undertake this kind of a work. And this is a very good added bonus. It improves your soft skills because of the interaction with the PhD students and the professors. And an impactful publication feels good, to yourself, that you're making an impact to the entire society. And it will help you to understand literature. Right now, research papers might be a little daunting, so it also helps to understand them. then handling big data, specifically if you are dealing with statistical analysis. And there's also an opportunity to learn wet lab experiments. I have spent some time in the lab trying to understand how wet lab experiments are performed and how sample collection and preparation takes place. Then most importantly, you gain a lot of research experience, which might be useful later on if you plan on taking it further. So I'll tell you the basic workflow. So what we are doing is using data sets from Proteome Exchange, and then using those proteomics data files, and then using a few softwares like MaxQuant, and then combining them with the transcriptomics data, and then performing some kind of statistical and machine learning analysis on it, and then which will tell us which proteins are correlated in both of the data. And then based on that, we plan on getting the pathway enrichment analysis, which will give a sense towards which biomarkers might be suitable for a test for the colorectal cancer. So this is the basic workflow. My role is more into the statistical analysis and the machine learning part, and also in the original data collection part, and then some targeted validation later on. So I'll be talking about the downstream statistical analysis a bit now. So MVI is a missing value imputation that we have to do because our data is not perfect at the beginning. So in every step, not only in this particular field, if you're dealing with data, you'll find imperfections in data, and this is a very handy skill which comes in, which becomes very useful later on. And then also normalization is done so that we have a plain sheet to work on, and then some kind of statistical tests, PCA, t-test, fold change test, Volcano plots, heat maps, all of them are used. And here you can, I've tried to give you a flavor of all of them. And then after that, we use machine learning algorithms such as SVM, that is support vector machine, and then random forest artificial neural networks, depending on the type of data and the constraints that we have. And then based on that, we can help to predict and classify our proteins as either tumorous or normal. And during my tenure, I also helped in the COVID 2020 versus 2021 project. That is, we were trying to differentiate between them, and we were seeing that which proteins are getting more upregulated or downregulated. That is showing an increasing trend. So a part of this job was data refining and then doing some targeted validation of multiple reaction monitoring. So I've tried to give you a small glimpse into this. And so yeah, this was a small glimpse into some of the work that I've done in the past few months. And I've personally found it very interesting because it gave me a lot of opportunity to learn new things. And for the future, we are hoping to get some more work done out of the transcriptomics data that we are doing. And hopefully we'll find a good biomarker. Thank you.
All right, so this probably gives you some flavor of how people from different specialized backgrounds could also contribute. And these are actually becomes these kind of original research becomes a good team play when we actually start from the clinicians who will have these challenging problems with the various type of diseases. And then the right type of samples being identified and procured. And then comes the various type of molecular biology technologies to generate the data, from the sequencing technologies to the mass spectrometry to various type of other cell-based experiments to generate data. And then once the data being generated, let's say imagine that we are talking about 100 patient analysis and 100 in a healthy individual. And now you're looking at all their genes or all their proteins and looking at which among those are going to be the major culprits which is causing the disease. So finally, what data you generate that becomes an Excel sheet in a big data format is like some sort of numbers, right? And those numbers one need to now make the best sense of that number from the very high computing power. So then it becomes more image analysis, kind of image processing and big data analysis work. And in this process, then, at IIT Bombay, we have a lot of collaboration where we really get benefited from mathematics department students for doing many statistical tests for these type of problems. Many computational science and mechanical and other kind of chemical engineering students to look into various type of data and then employ various machine learning algorithms to try to find what can be the best, the smallest and most influential group of proteins which could be taken forward for the further, either cancer treatment or for the diagnostic purpose. So this was just a flavor, of course, to give you a sense that how real research being done and how every individual is very important part of that team, which is being involved in the research. And usually very large team members are involved in doing this kind of research. All right, let's take a pause here and take some questions and comments, whatever curiosity you have so far. So before I move to the next topic. So some hands being raised on and off, now your time. All right, Alok, your turn, come first.
So I have a few things to ask and a few things to tell. So the first one I wanted to ask is how is it possible to combine data science and biology together?
So your voice got slightly broken, but if I understood correctly, how to combine the data sciences and biology together?
Yes, yes.
I think what video I showed you was probably one of the good examples. So even in the lockdown time, so last year senior batch was almost in the lockdown time like this.
Yeah.
And many of the students, we never saw them and they interacted with us. We are working on various type of these clinical problems, generate a lot of data. The data was sent to these students. We taught them different type of analysis workflows, how to take a small pilot data and analyze that. And then now they employed the same thing to the much bigger data set and try to come up with which of among the thousands protein, which can be that a small 5 or 10 proteins, which is making the major difference. And then he showed some data for the COVID patients as well. Idea was to look at mild and severe group of patients of the COVID. What kind of proteins are making different within these two groups as well. So again, biological and clinical data set, whatever data generates, as I said, readouts till that time you have biology or clinicians involved. Once the data is available, that data becomes the numbers. And you have to make a lot of statistical and the real sense of that data. So therefore, big data analysis becomes very important. Now with our current abilities of instrumentation, which I will be talking now in today, the latter part and the next lecture quite a bit, with the new advent of technologies, we have now ability to generate really huge amount of data at a very rapid pace. With the next generation sequencing, like, earlier Human Genome Project got completed. In 15 years time, one human got sequenced. Now every individual can be sequenced in a couple of hours time. So the data of 20,500 genes from one individual can be generated in a couple of hours. And likewise, the set of the centers which are having hundreds of NGS instruments can generate tons and tons of data. Likewise, we have mass spectrometers. In every 2 hours, we can generate data for at least 5,000 proteins from a given tumor sample. So much data can be generated, big data. But analysis still remains lot of, you have to give a lot of due diligence of looking at data normalization, data, should be properly analyzed before you can do some of the statistical stuff, because the platform has to be equal. So a lot of interesting thing goes on.
Because I've been passively learning how to be a data analyst over the time before the semester started.
Oh, you have been doing that?
Yeah.
All right, great. So you can always get in touch with us. I'll not take right now specific.
Then the
Yes.
second thing was, you didn't mention the Henrietta Lacks cells, like the HeLa cells, that black woman in the US who had cancer. And then when she died, it took the cells that took her cancer cells, and now they use that for research. And that's as they call it, an immortal cell line.
Very good. So you are very well read. I think, Alok, I appreciate that. So HeLa cell line is actually also very actively used in the cancer, especially for cervical cancer research. And again, some of the standard cell lines which people use in the labs, like MCF7, HeLa, HCT, and some of the other brain tumor cell lines. But what is actually more impactful is the actual cell which we can get from the cancer patients and try to generate those cells, and then try to look at the effect of our drugs on those kind of cells. And that's actually quite challenging to really keep them surviving and growing, right? These are the standard cell lines. They have been maintained over the years, so they also lose their, the true potential. And after getting, so many passages, you don't know exactly what you're working on. So there's always plus and minus of these, but what you give is a very classical example of a good cell line. Oh, look, I have to stop you, but I think nice to discuss many interesting things with you. Rohit, I'll take you next now.
Sir, could we discuss the ploidy in meiosis? There was some question in last year's,
All right.
there was some freshers resources. So
Towards the end of the my sessions and before quiz, I will actually show a couple of Q&A first, and then still if that does not answer you, then we can talk.
understood.
Right now, let's just talk about the first section, which we spoke about cell cycle, dysregulation, anything on cancer. If anything comes to your interest. Lot of things which you have in your mind for the quiz, I think that we can take at the end. Anyone else? Anupsa, you want to ask something? Please unmute, and then Karthik.
My question was regarding that cancer cells, they disobey internal checkpoints also.
Yes.
So what would that result in? Like mitosis gone wrong? So the cell
Everything is very
division.
rapid, you know, it is uncontrolled, right? So otherwise, as you discuss in the various property of the normal cell, you would like to achieve some density, and then once those cells get old or get lost over the time, then you want to replenish those cells with a newer growth of the cell. In
Cell
this case,
cycle.
here you are continuously cell is being going through the cell cycle, and mitosis keep happening, and you see layers and layers of cell being accumulated.
So the cell cycle duration is not followed here.
Cell cycle checkpoint means checkpoints will actually control the cell, right? And they will also perceive when the density have been achieved enough. In this case, they will not obey any of these blocks as well. So it means in some way you're right, the pace of these things will be much faster. They will not follow the checkpoint. Checkpoints actually in some way also ensures that correct level of DNA replication has happened, correct cyclins have been synthesized. So now you see a lot of mutation starts happening in the process of these uncontrolled and unregulated growth, right? Therefore, then things start getting deteriorated over the time with various mutations, some of them really becoming more detrimental for the cell to take that load forward. Okay. All right, Karthik. Karthik, please unmute.
Yes, sir. Sir, you said that late G2 checkpoint, the cycling combines with CDK, and in the mitosis phase checkpoint, the cyclin and the CDK, they disattach.
After the mitosis getting completed, so after metaphase has completed, cell can now cells in the cell cycle that now this process has completed properly, and now cell is going to divide, then they start dissociating.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to ask what kind of measures, what is the checkpoint in that late G1 phase? What happens there?
Checkpoint in the late G1 is actually the cyclin dependent kinases are present all the time, right? But they don't have the cyclins to bind. Cyclins are only getting synthesized in the S phase and getting accumulated later on with the G2 phase. So therefore, despite that CDKs are present, but they will not have the cyclin sufficient amount of protein to bind to that. And once that sufficient binding happens, then that perceive the signal to move to mitosis. After mitosis, these cyclins get degraded. So therefore, CDKs are keep floating, but then cyclins are not there. Again, S phase getting synthesized. So that the cycle continues.
So basically, absence of cyclin starts the S phase.
Absence of cyclin actually mentions that now the cycle is getting completed. And now when cell is again ready for the next cycle of DNA replication and the S phase to be happening, then of course cyclin will synthesize again. So that time, if you have to make a plot, you will see that S along with, in the S phase of DNA replication, cyclins are also getting higher. Whereas in the G1 phase, the levels are pretty low. Okay. Harshit. Harshit, please unmute.
Sir, how does radiation causes cancer?
Yeah, radiation causes cancer.
And how is it even used to treat it?
That's right. And radiation also being used for treatment, both with your right. There is always, some threshold above which, various ultraviolet radiation and various other type of radiation could be detrimental to do a lot of cancer mutation to happen. Whereas the low dosage are actually being used to try to control these cells and, burn these cells for that matter. In certain tumor type at the early stage when they detect, they would like to also even try to burn these cancer cells with radiation to try to control those. Whereas when the cancer cell actually generates sufficient mass and becomes difficult, then now they have to think about to do the surgery to remove them. But even after surgery, that region of where that tumor was there is still being treated with radiation often. Sometime directly surgery plus chemotherapy, sometime surgery plus radiation followed by chemotherapy. Some of these things are depending on which type of tumor you talk about, which type of therapies are available. All of these are context dependent. But again, the dosage becomes important here in terms of what can cause cancer and what can be used for treatment. But ideally, it is just as a way to burn these cells, which is already having the, when the cancer has been removed, and you are trying to burn these cancer cells, which could be remaining or reminiscent of the available in that tumor region. Okay. All right, Mohit.
Am I audible?
You are.
Sir, you said that whenever body, like for in case of somatic cells, whenever body loses cells, it is signaled to produce more cells so that density remains constant. So is it done by cells themselves, or the brain is giving them the orders to check on the density?
That's right. So I think there are many things which are playing important role here, for where they're all connected finally with the neurons, right? And if for some accident happens, for example, and now signal says, okay, now you need more clotting factors immediately for that region of the when your blood loss is happening, then more clotting factor has to get synthesized. So more of those synthesis will start happening in the body. Whereas in the normal situation, normal condition, when the cell achieves some level of density, it will send the cues and signal to the entire, the neurons, and they will of course interplay that, okay, now there is no need for further growth to happen, further division to happen. So it's all interplay, but at the time of requirement, then they can actually act much faster. However, if they're being regulated, they will not go beyond the density what is required. But how to control that density will be interplay of the requirements as well as the entire nervous system being discussing with them.
So instead of telling that such diseases are caused by unregulated splitting, unregulated forming of cells, can we say that it's the messenger's fault that it's not able to guess the density has been reached and it's still continuing to make new cells?
So there is no single factor here, like, there will be many things which will come as a part of, as you will go along and learn about the disease like cancer, many things will play important role. Sometimes mutation will be very critical. Density is just one way of discussion. And even cell cycle dysregulation or uncontrolled growth is one of the things. Even sometimes a lot of tumor mass is there, but that can remain there for a long time, right? And that remain benign. So that may not always be lethal for to really develop into advanced tumors. So therefore, there's a lot of interplay involved, many genetic factors, sometimes even the things like mutations, they all confound it and make it more serious in that direction. All right, sorry guys, you have also many good questions and interesting questions, but we are running quite late now. So a few more things can be put in the chat, and I'm yet to even cover my even basic second part as well. So let me move on. I really appreciate all of your interesting questions, and you're thinking slightly ahead and taking interest in subject. Let's now move on to another interesting topic, which is linked to some knowledge which we have acquired from the cell and cell regulation and cell programming, and how that could also be utilized to make the multiple copies of the same individual. So we'll talk about some more science fantasy now in the process of cloning. Think about, can you make the same animal multiple copies which look identical and without going through normal reproduction process? So that's what the cloning is, right? So this has started a very conceptual experiment from Sir John B. Gurdon in 1950s, when he took these frog and did some experiment very elegantly. He took the egg cell of frog with the UV treatment, removed the nucleus, made it enucleated egg cell. And now he took two different types of cells to fuse the egg cell. First, he tried with the frog embryo. Embryo means early embryonic stage cells. So he took some cell from those and tried to take nucleus from it. Or he took the tadpole, which is slightly developed, and took a skin cell or somatic cell from the skin intestinal cell over there. So all they are trying is to take a nucleus from these either early embryonic stage cell or from the differentiated intestinal cell and fuse them with the enucleated egg cell. And after that, then they are saying, okay, can that be triggered to develop the zygote. It means without doing the sperm and ova fusion, can you still develop the zygote? So now in this case, when they try to trigger that, they could see that, okay, most of these cells actually developed into the zygote, and early embryonic development happened, which resulted into tadpole development. Whereas in this case, when they took slightly advanced cell from the skin or intestines, then they found that, okay, very few cases were actually happening for the cloning, whereas most of them did not develop into tadpole stage. So he tried to draw the conclusion that early embryonic stage cells, if those can be taken nucleus from and put in the enucleated egg cell, and you trigger those with some stimulus, which could now start the cell to divide, then therefore that may result into the embryonic development, and you can have the tadpole formation, which is like a new frog development without going through the process. That became the frog or the animal cloning first success story for the Xenopus laevis. Then the big success came from the mammal cloning, which was of course of a lot of commercial value as well here in the sheep. And Dr. Ian Wilmot and his team, they showed that if you take the one sheep, their mammary cells, and culture those cells. Now you have seen how Petri dishes looks like, how agar plates look like, how the nutrients is required for cells to grow. So now I'm sure you can start feeling better about when you look at these diagrams, you can understand them better. So, and they took the egg cell from a different donor sheep, removed the nucleus like Gordon, what he did. So now you got enucleated egg cell, and then took one of the mammary cell, which is kept in the starving condition and kept in the culture. Now what they have understood the cell cycle so well, and of course we have not talked a great detail about these things to keep it still quite early. But in the cell cycle, there is a GO phase as well, before G1 phase, which we have not talked. But that GO phase is actually, that's what is quite important in this case here, when they try to arrest the cell cycle. It means this cell is not going to divide. They have, semi-starved the cell, arrested the cell cycle growth to happen. And now they are going to utilize this particular cell property to take and fuse them with the enucleated egg cell. Based on this particular experiment, now then they did almost 300 attempts. They tried various things to trigger the stimulus so that now this particular cell could work like a zygote, work like a fertilized cells and then develop into zygote and work like early embryonic development. So I think it was probably one of the 300 successful, only one successful experiment out of 300, which actually developed the early embryonic development. What is happening, like, the fertilized cells, the way it happens, it forms the 2 cell, 4 cell, 8, 16, 32, 64, and then morula, blastula, gastrula, then embryonic development happens. So in this case, they did early embryonic development in the culture condition. And after that, they put this particular embryo to the third sheep, as which was used as a surrogate mother. And some of these things, are also, biology is also adding some interesting general knowledge for you. When you hear a lot of time about surrogacy, which is one of the various taught or discussed topic in various forum, you must be hearing a lot of Bollywood celebrities, like Shah Rukh Khan, for example. His son, the recent one, is more of the surrogacy. So how this thing happens, like, although in this in the human cases, they are taking the normal sperm and the ova, doing those fusion separately in the culture conditions, and then moving those to the women, which is used as a surrogate for the child development to happen. But in this case, it is totally removing the normal fertilization and reproductive process, and all they're using is the somatic cell, normal body cell, mammary cell, and using them with the egg to fuse that and generate the complete full organism. That became the clone. And that was actually one of the science fiction to really turn in reality. Happened in 1997. This is scientist Dr. Ian Wilmot, who gets credit from Rosen Institute in Scotland. I had just some opportunity to interact with him and share a stage at Harvard when I was doing my proteomics research. And of course, he gave talk on the cloning. I don't work in cloning area, but I talk mainly on the proteomics and protein research. Now, this particular area is essentially resulted into many other commercial avenues as well. And people started thinking about how to do other animal cloning. You have interesting pets which you like to clone and make more of them. For example, in this case shown is the carbon copy cat, CC cat. But what you will observe that the two cats, which is the clones, they're not exactly same. One is having different type of orange type of patch, one is a grayish patch. So, and likewise, people started finding that there are many defects also being observed in the cloned animals. So two cloned animals will not look exactly the same. And they will also have some certain defects. So all of those actually resulted into issues and ethical discussion about should we move ahead with animal cloning, and there were actually claimed by the companies at that time that they can actually do the human cloning as well. So with a lot of ethical and security and other issues, finally this idea was being dropped to do the animal cloning and human cloning. But what actually continued was the therapeutic cloning with the stem cells, because for accident and any kind of damaged organ to be repaired, if you can have these unspecialized stem cells, which has potential to get transformed into any specialized cells, and that's their specialized skill. Now, if you can utilize different type of culture condition, different nutritions, same stem cell could be converted to the liver cell or to the nerve cell, to the blood cells. All of these are going to now be utilized for various therapeutic interventions, right? Which is very important now for different type of treatments. So therefore, this type of research being supported and continued, and therapeutic cloning was further favored. A scientist, Dr. Shinya Yamanaka, he did some experiments in Japan, and he showed that, okay, if you take the stem cells and let's say you have some transcription factors, which if you are fusing these fibroblast skin cells, that may result into the pluripotency of these cells, which means you are trying to make the cells to get converted to any type of cell eventually, induce pluripotent stem cells. Again, some of these will be quite core concept and difficult concepts, so do not worry for your exam point of view. But this particular experiment, I'm just showing you to convey that some interesting experiment like this actually led us to give the Nobel Prizes for how we have understood the cell reprogramming so much. And based on it, our understanding that which factors could trigger the cell stimulus, and especially the stem cells, which could now be transformed to any type of specialized cells, given the Nobel Prize to Shinya Yamanaka. And John B. Gurdon got Nobel Prize for his innovations and his first conceptual thing, what he showed for the frog cloning. Of course, there was always debate that why, the sheep cloning could not get that particular prize, but there are a lot of things being discussed over there. So
next to the 2012 Nobel Prizes. The first was awarded today for groundbreaking work in reprogramming cells in the body. Ray Suarez looks at those achievements.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institute has today decided to award the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine 2012 jointly to John B. Gurdon and Shinya Yamanaka.
The two scientists are from two different generations and celebrated today's announcement half a world apart. But today, they were celebrated together for their research that led to a groundbreaking understanding of how cells work. Sir John Gurdon of Cambridge University was awarded for his work in 1962. He was able to use specialized cells of frogs, like skin or intestinal cells, to generate new tadpoles and show DNA could drive the formation of all cells in the body. 40 years later, Dr. Yamanaka built on that and went further. He was able to turn mature cells back into their earliest form as primitive cells. Those cells are in many ways the equivalent of embryonic stem cells because they have the potential to develop into specialized cells for heart, liver, and other organs. Dr. Yamanaka is currently working at Kyoto University. Embryonic stem cells have had to be harvested from human embryos, a source of debate and considerable controversy.
All right, while this thing are happening, there are more and more efforts are made by scientists from around the world to try to come up with the more cloning and claiming that they can be best in doing this particular type of research. So Dr. Wong Woo-suk from South Korea, his team developed many cloned animals from the dairy cow to Korean cows. And they actually showed a lot of innovative methods that in which way they can actually do the somatic cell nuclear transfer to generate the embryonic stem cell to become the pluripotent. So based on their findings, they were actually able to publish their work in some of the very top scientific journals. What you see here is Science. And again, some of you who are just starting your journey, you may not be aware of, but in the research field, the journals like Nature and Science, these are considered to be the best journals. And if your findings being published over there, it means that has been acceptable or accepted by the very critical scientific community, and it has gone through a lot of rigorous peer review process. So many scientists independently review the data, and after all the changes and revisions, then the paper get accepted. So reaching till this far is quite a big accomplishment. And as a result, Dr. Wang Woo-suk was almost on the cover pages of many of these journals, and he was in the media and news and the limelight heavily that time. In fact, in the Korea, being a small country, they really take these things very closely with the scientist. And he was given almost to the status of the president when everything he was enjoying the status in whole country. So these are the things happening. But in the science, also, you have to understand that a lot of rigorous experiments and the ethics involved in doing this kind of work. So therefore, your work has to be quite reproducible, and anybody should be able to reproduce those work over the time. When you publish something heavily, then of course, a lot of people start trying to replicate those experiments and do these experiments to see, like, can they also reproduce what you are doing, and can they generate some more data? So when people started following this work of Dr. Wang Woo-suk, they started finding several issues of reproducibility problems. They also see there are some images which does not look like very real images. They could see some different type of claims made, like 15 cell lines used or 11 cell line used. All of these discrepancies being reported to the editors of these journals. And these journals take it very seriously, their prestige, so as the institutes. So now the editor responded from Science about this discovery.
The journal Science has received and reviewed the summary of the report from last night of the Seoul National University Investigating Committee that has been looking into 2 papers published by Dr. Wang and his colleagues in South Korea in Science in 2000 and 2004 and 2005. The findings involve serious research misconduct, finding that both papers contained fraudulent data and fraudulent conclusions.
So this is a very serious thing, in science, you cannot report anything which is incorrect and fabricated data. And therefore, the institutes, they have their own research committees. They start investigation. And in this case now, Dr. Wang Woo-suk being called in the same night, after Science editor's statement, to their university to answer these questions. At the same time, and reason I'm emphasizing about this as a way to communicate to you, you're all starting very early stage in your journey to become engineers, to become scientists, to become good professionals. It's really important in this particular profession to be really honest and to be really trying to be as original as possible. Plagiarism issues, and you will see all these statements will be given to you in IIT Bombay all the time. And that you have to take it very seriously. And if you live up to that, then I'm sure you will make a lot of progress. So in this case, Dr. Wang Woo-suk is being called in the night. And what you see here is like, the public is still waiting in the night for him and showing the support for, All right, but finally that, his work did turn out to be fraudulent, and
disgraced stem cell researcher Wang Woo-suk has been sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison and 2 years of probation for embezzling state and private funds and buying human eggs. The Supreme Court issued the verdict Thursday, which comes 8 years after he admitted to faking his research.
So Dr. Wang Woo-suk was sentenced to jail. His career really got damaged, and of course, it left a lot of issues that how this research was being done. But likewise, there was some more interesting work going on in Japan at Riken Center with Dr. Haruko Obokata, where Dr. Yamanaka is also from Japan, so people had a lot of positive feeling for Japanese scientists. And in this case, she showed that rather than those transcription factors which Dr. Yamanaka used to trigger the pluripotency, if you just simply change the pH of the medium, that may result into a very quick changing of these stem cells to become the pluripotent cells. And that phenomenon known as STAP, or stimulus triggered acquisition of pluripotency, which got published in, again, top journals Nature. And this is a more recent story of 2014-15. So this is the experiment she was doing in the lab.
Dr. Haruko Obokata is used to working quietly in her Kobe laboratory. far away from the attention of the outside world. But today, the young researcher was suddenly plunged into the media spotlight as news of her breakthrough spread around the world. She told the collected journalists that early on, her idea was considered so bizarre, she'd nearly given up on it altogether. Nobody believed me when I told them what I'd found. So one time when I was lying awake in bed at night, I told myself that I'd scrap the experiment completely if I didn't get results the next day.
Unfortunately, her research also did not live up to the expectations. People found many problems and data fraudulent.
Scientists from a leading Japanese research institute have apologized for the grave mistakes in recent papers on a new way of creating stem cells. The research was hailed as a revolutionary discovery when published in January in the British journal Nature, but mounting questions about the methodology and results forced the Nikken Center to take action. NHK World's Takafumi Terui reports.
Nikken scientists spent about 4.
So again, these visuals, what you see, the universities have their research integrity office, which looks for these issues, and they are taken very seriously. In Riken Center, there are many Nobel laureates, Nobel Prize winners. Now, those committees are evaluating these issues because you are not anymore just an individual coming from schools. You are now all, for example, brand of IT Bombay. So that one day changes everything, right? And now you have to still try to learn to become that high quality and try to become part of it. So now in this case, she is not only just one scientist doing something wrong, it is becoming part of that center, and center has to be accountable to it. So investigation being made. Unfortunately, she has to accept that she was guilty and she was found guilty. She was given actually time and opportunity to replicate her experiments for 6 months under video surveillance. And so just imagine that how embarrassing it could be that you have been put on the CCTV to do the experiments. And she did try, but that could not reproduce her step phenomenon. And then she was, of course, removed from the center and got all punishments. Many of the scientists of this group, and again, when you are part of any team, any group, participating in making a robot, participating in making a racing car or device or anything, you are part of a team. The success and failure of team goes together. You can win an international competition. You can all be spelled out if you are one person is actually doing anything wrong. Please make sure that you are as a team is working together with full honesty and strength, right? So in this case, one of the key scientists committed suicide based on the impact what it had.
Paper that was eventually retracted as died of an apparent suicide. Yoshiki Sasai, heralded as the brain maker by the journal Nature in 2012, was found.
So this is very sad, and you can see now the same research area, lot of promising results being seen in the cell reprogramming area, resulted into Nobel Prizes, rise and fall of stars. But what is also important in this case, and reason I thought to bring the ethical discussion in context, that how society is so much closely watching what the scientists do, what engineers do, and finally their support is very much toward the scientists. And these are some of the real clips from the from these news agencies. Now the entire South Korea showed a lot of protection and lot of things happened for Wang Woo-suk. They thought it's all conspiracy against him, but eventually you represent institution and country, and your reputation becomes very important, which is you have to live up to that credit over the years, right? So I hope this cell reprogramming will also keep you awake and give you the story to be more ethical as you are starting your new journey towards your science and research career. I'll take a last couple of seconds time to just introduce you to a new technology, which I will talk maybe in more in detail in next class. Recombinant DNA technology, which is changing quite a bit of applications in the whole world. Idea here is very simple. We have learned about microorganisms like bacteria. Can we engineer the bacterial plasmid? So these are the plasmid, which is other than bacterial having chromosome, there are many extra chromosomal material known as plasmid. If you take this bacterial plasmid and now you have a gene of interest which you'd like to insert in that plasmid, you just cut that plasmid with some enzyme, and same way you cut the gene as well, and then stitch them together with enzyme like DNA ligase, which now forms a new molecule, recombinant DNA molecule, which now you can again move that back in the bacteria, because bacteria, it has come from bacteria. Bacteria can simply incorporate this plasmid And as the bacteria will start multiplying, you can make multiple copies of this plasmid or in turn the gene of your interest. So now you can make so much copies and amount of DNA from the gene of interest, which can be used for making transgenic crops, for using various type of applications for the marine applications, or one could then synthesize the proteins of therapies and interest toward the therapeutic treatments. All of these are various applications of recombinant DNA technology. And again, basic research, how it takes time, but actually helps us to do these kind of work eventually is actually some of these fundamentals which comes out of it. In this case, these plasmids for which the knowledge is being generated now, these are small bacterial DNA molecule, double-stranded, covalently closed, circular molecules, which is commonly found in many bacteria. And now people have engineered, scientists have engineered these plasmids to add certain genes over there, which could be utilized for these experiments. When you saw those plates which we showed you, any bacteria can grow on those LB agar plate. How, if you are doing this experiment and you have a gene of interest, which you'd like to clone, how are you going to select only gene of your interest? If your gene of interest is in this particular bacterial plasmid, and this particular plasmid is having the gene for chloramphenicol or ampicillin or tetracycline antibiotics, then it is going to give resistance to only this bacteria can actually grow on that plate. If you add in the media, in LB agar, you add ampicillin, and this bacterial backbone has the plasmid has the ampicillin resistant gene, then only that bacteria can survive, which is having gene of your interest. Rest will not survive. This is how people can do selection. So some of these things being actively used in the field of recombinant DNA technology, genetic engineering, which we will be talking in more detail in the next class, and we'll show you some very interesting experiments about polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and how in more recent time RT-PCR was actively used. These things are next to come. More and more emphasis we will give in the course as we go along towards some of the more recent innovation, more recent technologies, which will give you the very recent perspective. I hope today's lecture is giving you some idea towards cell cycle, our cancer cell, dysregulation, some key concept of the cloning, which becomes very important, and the also generated into a lot of ethical issue, which will probably stay in your mind. And read some of these chapters for more clarity for various topics which I have used in this particular today's lecture. I know I'm getting indication that I'm getting late now, but let me just show you a couple of questions which some of you have asked for from the forum in the form which we give you. And so for example, like, you are asking that why the crossing over is mainly seen in the gamete cell and not in the somatic cells. So again, we have shown you 3 unique events which are happening in the meiotic cells, which is showing here the entire homologous chromosomes being formed. The crossing over is happening here, and then that entire homolog is moving to the metaphase. These things only happens uniquely in meiotic cells, and meiotic process does not happen in the normal mitosis process. What happens to the other cell organelles during the cell division? They will also grow further and replicate. Therefore, now when the cell gets divided, you will have all the cytoplasmic organelle as well for the cell, all the cell growth and function to happen. When we look at the cell division in the plants, plants have some more specialized ways of looking at the cell division because they have the cell wall as well, and they lack the centrosomes. So they have evolved some specialized mechanism for this cell division. We'll not talk in detail right now. We will leave some of these handouts and detailed explanation to you for you to read. Ribosomes is very specialized. It's actually specialized organelle to say it. You cannot say it is not an organelle, but does not have the membrane and have very different distinct subunits, which if you are really keen about it to learn about, prokaryotic and eukaryotic ribosomes have different numbers based on sedimentation units they have. And then you can look at 70S or 80S ribosomes, which is again can be looked into 50S and 30S, further split into these type of thing. But we are not going to talk in great detail, at least in my part of the module, about ribosome and various type of rRNA or tRNA, which again, some of you have asked questions about differences in these type of RNA, which you can read in the slide, which I will share with you. But this part will be discussed more in detail when you will learn more about the transcription and translation processes. I'm sure Professor Shilja Nair, when she will talk to you, she will talk about these topics in great detail. I think that's pretty much, I'll stop here. I can maybe take 1 or 2 quick questions on the chat if required. And today we are going to give you some slightly more time for the your quiz to happen, which will be, I think 12 minutes we are giving today. So 12 minutes will be in the Moodle. so that you get some extra time for buffering. All right, Vikas, you have any question? Please unmute. We'll not take many questions right now. We are almost towards 4:56. We have to give you 13 minutes.
Sir,
Yes, yeah.
Sir, in the last lecture, you discussed like some enzymes were attached for the fluorescence of the cancer cells, and we observe it under the microscope.
Right. So actually,
yeah.
we were talking about trypsin enzyme, and trypsin is used to actually, the cells get really adhered on these substrates. So just to have them removed, you need a delicate balance of some enzyme to be used for that purpose. You don't want to use it for very long as well, as Abhilash mentioned that video. So you use trypsin for that purpose over there. Trypsin as an enzyme we actually use for the proteolytic digestion when we take the proteins and that chop down to protein to make the peptides. And there are specific residues where actually it can really do the cleavage with the arginine and lysine residues. So again, there are many interesting things there for these enzymes. Rohit, you have any question? Rohit, please unmute.
So could we discuss the ploidy that follows in meiosis?
All right, so we have discussed that, in the entire reproductive cycle or that entire life cycle, you will have haploid and the diploid phases. While the diploid phase, just keep in mind 2n equals to 46. 2n is the diploidy level and 46 chromosomes are maintained in the entire mitotic divisions and with the normal growth and repair which is required in the somatic cells. Whereas in the gamete cell, in the egg and sperm, you are going to have the haploid cells, 23 chromosomes each. And once they get fertilized and get fused, now you get the zygote and further development, which will again make it diploid. So this is where haploid and diploid interplay is important.
So there was this question in previous year quiz, which has the answer meiosis 1 anaphase.
That became very specific right now. I think what we'll do right now, we are going to start the quiz. Almost 5 o'clock we have time. I don't want to get too delayed for the class. And those who want to talk more, I'll stay here for some more time. I'll come back. You can come back. We can talk more about it. We can't give you exact answer for any specific quiz question right now. If you're really ahead, you can always ask question there in the previous Google form which we give. So all of you, please utilize the Google forms to take your scripts in great detail. Of course, in the class, given the time, we can only talk as much as we have time. So let's start the quiz now for 12 minutes today. And I'll be available to you again after this. We'll talk more interesting topics and ideas what you have, and we'll have to discuss further. Okay. Good luck for the quiz, and we'll resume back and talk soon. Class is going to officially end now. Those who want to leave after quiz can leave. Those who want to come back can join back. Thank you.